We're coming down to crunch time again in the Illinois State Legislature. Will they pass a budget or will they punt? We'll talk about it next on CapitolView. Welcome to CapitolView, the weekly program on Illinois state government. I'm Bruce Rushton, moderator and writer with Illinois Times. Joining me this week on CapitolView is David Dahl, reporter for WTAX Radio. Welcome, Dave.
Hello.
And also Hannah Meisel, reporter for Law 360 based in Springfield. Welcome, Hannah.
Glad to be here.
Great. As is always the case lately on CapitolView, the big subject this week is the state budget. The grand bargain remains somewhat in limbo. I think that perhaps of anybody in the state capitol, Hannah is up to speed on this as anybody. Hannah, give us a quick rundown about how the week began and where we are now that the week is about wound up.
Sure. So after last week's brief attempt to revive the grand bargain, this week on Wednesday, Senate President John Cullerton decided to call all the bills, but this time uncoupling all of them, because before they had been a negotiated package and there was specific language in the bills tying them all together. But this week he called most of the 13 bills. We had many that passed, a couple that did not pass, and some that were not called at all. So let's start with the ones that passed. So some bipartisan, fairly easy procurement reform and local government consolidation, because in Illinois we do have the largest number of local governments of any state.
Something like in excess of 6,000
units.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So those were easy-ish. Those got bipartisan support. Another bipartisan support bill that was not the hardest sell of the 13 was a gaming bill, which would allow for the state to construct 6 new casinos all over. And it would also open other gambling avenues at existing casinos and racetracks.
Would that include Cook County?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right.
And then we got into the harder stuff, which was $7 billion in borrowing to pay off old state debts. Mm-hmm. From here on out, they did not get any Republican votes. Republicans were upset that Democrats called the bills. Democrats defended themselves by saying, look, we only have 2 more weeks. You know, it needs to go to the House if it's going to go anywhere. You know, and then the House is obviously going to change things. We need time. Okay. The Republicans say, no, we are so close on negotiating the entire package.
Okay. Well, let's stop and talk about that for a second. That's $7 billion in past due bills, correct?
Oh, well, we actually hit this week $14 billion.
Exactly. So it's half of the debt that we owe. My understanding is the state is paying 12% on past due debt. Is that the correct figure?
That sounds right. You know, I'm not up to speed on the exact interest rate, but it is a lot, safe to say.
Sure.
We are spending about $11 million a day.
$11 million a day.
In a combination of autopilot spending and past due bills and interest rates on, you know, a variety of things that the state is in debt on.
Well, if that's the case, if it's 12% to pay that we're paying now, you can borrow certainly that much money if you're the government for substantially less than 12%, I would imagine. If that being the case, what explains the GOP resistance to borrowing to pay these bills if you can actually reduce the amount of interest you're going to be paying?
Well, it's one of those things where, you know, you kind of kick the can down the road, as we like to say around the Capitol. When you bond to borrow, I can't remember how long the borrowing period was, but, you know, it's one of those things where you saddle future generations of taxpayers and lawmakers with big interest rates. Okay. Now, interest rates, we already don't have the greatest credit rating here in Illinois, but bond houses have been breathing down lawmakers' necks essentially for the last couple months, warning that if we don't have a budget by May 31st and it's looking very precarious, we are very likely going to get ourselves into junk bond territory.
Sure.
And junk bond territory you do not want to be in. Very, very expensive to borrow. Pension funds cannot buy your bonds if you are in junk bond territory, so you have less borrowers overall.
Sure. Okay. And so
lenders.
if I'm hearing you correctly, I mean, obviously there's bad things that happen if you get out of investment grade and down to junk bond. But on the other hand, if you can save money by borrowing to pay the debt, if you can make some sort of ironclad, okay, I promise I'm really going to be responsible after this. What's so wrong with it? Are we talking about something that's ideological or real? What do you think, Dave?
I think it comes down to one party doesn't want to be the one holding the bag or being rat-effed in the next series of political ads. I think that's the case with this bill. I think it's the case with the budget, with the tax increases that they haven't voted on yet, and with the school bill. I think that's what it's all about. They say they're close together. They could be together if they wanted to be, but they don't want to be the one that has to wear the jacket, so to speak. Speaking of that, how did you pull that together? Was that intentional?
My pug did this for me, actually. I just throw it all on the floor, and wherever the pug sits, that's what I wear that day.
I could do worse.
Oh, well,
and
you would know.
Totally.
I'm sorry, Hannah, we interrupted you, but I think that's a good point, Dave. I mean, overarching all of this, and it almost doesn't need to be said anymore, is this toxic almost political atmosphere of not wanting to wear the jacket and wanting to be able to get campaign fodder for the upcoming elections, which are getting closer every day. So
it's nonstop. We're nonstop.
Sure. Okay. So Hannah, again, okay, let's go on from the inability or the toughness in reaching an agreement to borrow to get out of debt. What else did they do or try to do?
Sure. Well, interesting dichotomy of the Illinois legislature. They passed a budget. They passed $36.5 billion in a spending framework. However, yes, but they did not pass the actual budget implementation bill, which not only provides the authority to spend that $36.5 billion, but it also contains the lion's share of cuts. And you saw on that bill a lot of Democrats very hesitant to vote for that. Of course, that also got no Republican votes, even though Democrats were very quick to point out it was based on Republican Bill Brady's framework.
Sure.
So the cuts in the budget implementation bill, that's, I want to say, without the pension savings that they are assuming, which we will get to, which is a whole other thing. I want to say it's about $2.5 billion in cuts. That includes, smaller programs, employment here and there, but also what a lot of Democrats said that they were most afraid of is that, we'll quote State Senator Dan Biss, who happens to be running for governor, Democrat from Evanston. He says, he told reporters after the vote on Wednesday that it would give the governor something like $375 million in the freedom to just cut Medicaid however he sees fit.
Sure.
And Dan Biss and some other Democrats said they don't trust the governor.
Sure. But not to interrupt, but I mean, that's progress, is it not? I mean, just to identify $2.5 billion in cuts, that's better than where we were 6 months ago, is it not? Is that some sign of progress?
We're on $40 billion autopilot now, and this spending plan is something like $36.5 billion. So, I mean, it's going to take cuts, and it's going to take a combination of cuts and revenue, and I think anybody can see that.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Medicaid. My understanding was that the Democrats at least agreed in principle in the Senate to, okay, we'll go with in the area of a little over $400 million in Medicaid cuts. And so that's something that I don't want to call it a sacred cow, but it's something that they have been resistant to cutting Medicaid in the past. Isn't that kind of giving something? If that is giving, what are the Republicans given in return? Anything?
It's interesting you say that because, and this is something we'll get to a little later, when Senator Menard had a news conference about school funding, he said that the way the administration and the Republicans, the minority party in the legislature, are working is give us what we want and your reward will be to vote for a worse bill. And so the Democrats are hard pressed to say the Republicans are really in a giving mood, other than the leadership of the Democrats has said the governor wants all of what he wants, and then he'll let you vote for a tax increase.
Okay. How's Radonio taking this? Do you have any sense of this? Because I think that she had, and Cullerton had gone forward at least a lot earlier in the session and said, we'll take the slings and arrows and do some tough stuff. I mean, how's she dealing with this?
A few weeks ago, they let her run out onto the field by herself and take the only Republican vote on it while no one else would. And the governor was blamed by the Democrats, and of course the governor's office denied that. Haven't heard from Radonio lately. The post-game news conferences have featured Senator Brady, who is the top deputy now, and Senators Barrickman, McConaughey, and Rose. So Senator Radonio, Leader Radonio, really hasn't been the public face of it this week anyway.
Okay. What is that? Is that portend anything? Should we read anything into that she's been kind of MIA recently, at least?
Well, I wouldn't say MIA, but she certainly hasn't been out front on it as Brady has. But there's been, as someone said to me, rumor and insinuendo, which I can't unthink, insinuendo, that both Radonio and Cullerton were planning to hang it up, and Cullerton affirmatively said, no, I'm coming back. And with Radonio, I think she doesn't have anything to announce yet.
Okay. Right. What else, Hannah? I mean, give us a rundown. Is that it, or is there more to the grand bargain than?
Oh, there's so much more. So glad you asked. So what did not pass is property tax freeze.
Okay.
And I already talked about the budget implementation bill, but let's talk about the property tax freeze.
Sure.
Because of all the things in the grand bargain, and it does span a lot of state government, it turns out this has been, at least, if we're to believe both sides what they say, it's been the largest sticking point. So last week, Republicans told reporters that they were holding out for basically a 4-year freeze. That's more in line with what the governor wants. He has long, asked for relief for the taxpayers. There are some areas in Illinois that do have extremely high property taxes. Of course, there's a history there. You can blame the state's school funding formula, among other things, like we already talked about. We have a crazy amount of local government units. But so Democrats, however, say, no, 4 years? Are you kidding me? It's way too long. In fact, Senate President Cullerton said on the floor, like, are you kidding me? Are you serious?
Yeah, but I mean, if you are, in fact, and we have been racing New Jersey to have the highest property taxes in the nation, this would seem something that would resonate, I think, with a lot of folks. I mean, math being math, you can look at it and say, that's the figure. We're way out of whack with the rest of the country. And so, I mean, presumably, this is an issue of what takes its place. Is that a fair guess on my part?
Yeah, Republicans, they are holding out for what they call, tax parity. So if Republicans are going to say yes on, raising the income tax and, increasing sales taxes, then they want something in return. They want, a 4-year freeze on property taxes. For Democrats, they are afraid for especially the low property value areas of the state that it kind of seals their fate for the period in which a freeze is in place. They can't ask for any more, even if they need it.
Sure, they're already struggling.
The current income tax plan has been proposed is to raise it for 7 years. So 7 years of a higher income tax in exchange for a 2-year property tax freeze. It's pretty easy to say that won't fly.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about the income tax for a second, if we could. That's kind of, I think, probably the main fuel on the grand bargain when it comes to revenue. And it would go, I mean, I think that there seems to be some sort of allergy in the General Assembly to getting it back up to 5% where it was temporarily. It would be 4.95, which is the most recent one we've gotten. And as you point out, Dave, it would have expired after 7 years. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I look at that and I'm thinking, is this just a grand stopgap? Or, I mean, is this kicking the can down further than we have before? What do you think?
The way the governor plays it, by the time he gets his reforms that he wants, business will be so good in Illinois that we'll be able to absorb having the lower income tax again, because the economy is going to be booming. The job creators are going to be here creating jobs. Maybe GE will move here after all. Who knows? He keeps saying that we were the first choice for General Electric, because we have O'Hare Airport and a great workforce, but they chose Massachusetts instead because Mike Madigan wants to raise taxes. So, but the governor has said that term limits and redistricting, workers' comp, some of the other changes he wants will be the seed that engenders a positive business environment for the people who want to come here and locate businesses.
Well, let's set redistricting and term limits over here for a second, because I think those are probably pretty tough nuts to crack given political realities. Let's talk about workman's comp for a second. Early in the session, it seemed like folks were fairly optimistic that this is something that could be worked out. It hasn't been signed, sealed, delivered. Why not? What's been the hang up there?
We're told, reporters are told that it's the governor who needs more convincing that what the framework is now is good enough.
Okay.
And apparently he's just not buying it quite yet. But we are told that, Republicans and Democrats are very close on the workers' comp issue. And of all the things that we're told are very close, I would actually believe that one more than a lot of the other ones.
Well, one of the things that Democrats and labor point out is the 2011 workman's comp changes haven't really taken hold because the insurance companies have not passed the savings along to customers.
All right.
That the insurance companies are getting rich and nobody else is, and the environment would be good if only for those darned insurance companies.
So we're not blaming Republicans or Democrats. Well, we're blaming Rauner, I guess, to a bit, to a point. But we're blaming insurance companies now. That's the story.
That's what the labor folks are saying.
Okay, great. Speaking of taxes, let's talk for a second about the another element of the grand bargain, which would be extending the sales tax to services. What's that about? Where are we at with that?
Sure. From the last estimate, I guess that we've gotten, they're saying maybe only $149 million in revenue from sales taxes, and that's way down from initial estimates, some as high as maybe even $2 billion.
Absolutely.
And I would say it's because industries, they all like we've talked about this on this program before. Industries have the ability to hire lobbyists, to go down to Springfield, to call up their individual lawmakers and say, please don't do this. You're going to run us out of town. You're going to run us out of the state.
Shockingly, would be no tax on lawyers in this one, as I understand it. But I think you're exactly right. I think that there was a study that was put forth, I think, just a couple of years ago by the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. This is the
Martieri Group.
Yeah, exactly. These folks have a good reputation as not swinging, I think, either particularly far right or particularly far left. They're viewed, I think, as somewhat in the center. And they said, hey guys, $2 billion. That's what this could raise if we extended it, and that would be consumer to consumer. We're not talking, these are consumer taxes, not business to business. How do you get 1.49 million out of 2.1 billion? I mean, they just limited it that much, or have they really shown their cards much about what would be taxed and what wouldn't be taxed?
I haven't delved into it, but the latest proposal doesn't look to be as broad as previous iterations of Senate Bill 9.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen things where it indicates that landscaping services and lawn services, those would be taxed. Hair removal would be taxed, but not haircuts. And what the difference is on that, I'm not quite sure. And so going into this, not just this session, but when we really thought we were in a budget pickle, and we're in a deeper one now probably than then when Rauner first took office. I think this was seen by a lot of folks as, yeah, we're in a hole, but there's an opportunity now for, I think, tax overhaul the tax code. The governor himself said that. What's happened to that? Is anything happened to that? Are folks still thinking that, hey, we can move from what's viewed as a very regressive tax code to something more progressive that works for more citizens? Has that just been lost in all this?
Well, the easiest thing to do is nothing. I mean, you're not hearing about the pop tax anymore. The builders had a news conference to say the home remodeling shouldn't be taxed. And after a while, you're numbed to the point where day after day, it's rally, news conference, committee hearing. I don't want to be taxed. I don't want my service cut. I don't want this. Don't cut me. Don't tax me. And if I were a lawmaker, I'd say, you're not giving me anywhere to go.
Yeah.
When the only response is, gore that other guy's eye. should have pointed at you would say. I didn't mean to infer, Hannah.
Feel free.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and I suppose one argument would be if everybody is taxed, if all the lawyers say are taxed, or all the plumbers are taxed, folks don't call plumbers, they're not going to say, it would seem to me, geez, my house is flooding, but I'm going to let it happen because I don't want to pay a plumber because of the tax, or I'm being sued for everything I own, but I don't want to hire a lawyer because of the tax. These are essential sorts of things, and
It could be argued that not all lawyers and not all plumbers are scrupulous. And maybe
Well-
they'd say, I'll do that work for you, cash.
sure. Well, fair enough, and there's always, you know, ways around taxes, and that's also part of the grand bargain.
Or you could do it yourself, badly.
Yeah, well, and lots of people do. You know, and that was also part of the grand bargain, was to close some corporate loopholes. Where are we at with that? I mean, is that something? I mean, who could argue against closing loopholes? Is this something that's controversial, or is this another one person's loophole? Is another person's something else?
I think, you know, the phrase closing corporate loopholes is popular, you know, everywhere. People people love the idea of, you know, corporations avoiding taxes or what have you, and, you know, just pocketing that extra money. But I think when it comes to, you know, again, the specific industries, you know, in their lobbying power and their relationships with people in Springfield, it gets to be a lot more nuanced than just, you know, throwing around the phrase, let's close corporate loopholes.
Sure. I want to make sure we talk about this and give it the attention it deserves, and that's education funding, because I think it's probably really important to a lot of folks in the state. Bill passed out of the Senate. Governor Rauner immediately issued a press release saying he wasn't a fan. Hannah, what's in that bill, and what are its chances?
You know, the funny thing about this bill is that it is extremely close to the Republican version offered by Senator Barrickman, and the one that was sponsored Wednesday is the longtime sponsor and champion of school funding reform, Democrat Andy Bernard.
Okay.
And so in this, you would hold all districts harmless for a year.
Okay.
You know, you would break schools up into 3 tiers of neediness.
Okay.
You know, that would get different levels of funding support from the state. Now, what Republicans were upset about, 2 things. They were frustrated that they had asked for a district-by-district analysis of, you know, what that would do to the districts and an individual, you know, lawmakers.
And there are how many school districts in the state of Illinois?
More than 800.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like 855 or something like that.
Yeah, so they want a district-by-district analysis of that.
Yes, which
Okay.
they've done before.
Okay,
They've
fair
done
enough.
Before on previous iterations of this.
Okay.
But they were upset that that was not released. Although it seemed to have been released in a interesting way today.
Well, previous iterations have been out, and it turns out that Thursday, pamphleteer Dan Proft, whose PAC is funded by the Republicans, put out information in one of his newspapers, or at least text printed on newsprint and distributed in neighborhoods, saying that the Senate Bill 1, the school funding bill, would make certain school districts get less money, and the truth is the information is either outdated or inaccurate. And is it willfully so? Is there a direct line between the governor's office and pamphleteer Dan Proft? You could be forgiven for surmising that, but the governor's office denies it. In fact, just before we're taping here at midday on Friday, Senator Menard had a news conference saying that the information that Proft used clearly came from either the governor's office or the Republicans or the State Board of Education, that government information, public documents, were used and either altered or were knowingly inaccurate, given to Proft, a campaigner, to put in the, the Kankakee County Daily Blab or something like that.
Yeah. Pamphlets here, it almost makes him sound like a son of liberty or something back in the Revolution days. Provocateur, I'm not quite sure what the...
Well, you know, he would say that he's a publisher, just like the Journal Star, the Chicago Tribune are.
Okay.
Where are we? Journal Register's
Journal
down here.
Register.
I'm in Peoria.
Yes,
but he would say that he stands on the same line as everybody else, and that's probably not the case, and it's probably difficult for me to tell you that, and be able to make that distinction in a way that makes sense. But I asked at the news conference, because they said they wouldn't name Proft by name. They said he was a campaign operative and that he's part of the Rauner campaign machinery. And they said that the Kankakee County Daily Blab doesn't have a shred of credibility and that the information there shouldn't be considered credible. And when you've got 4, 5, 6 Senate Democrats lined up in the blue room behind the lectern, that's a lot of weight behind something that you don't think is credible.
Yeah.
And so one reporter said, now let's say you found the ghost of Walter Cronkite and put him on TV at halftime of the Super Bowl. Walter Cronkite has credibility. The Super Bowl, you've got a big audience. And if I were to scribble something on the bathroom wall, it would not be credible and no one would see it. And it would seem that these pamphlets, because it is more campaign literature than news, what's the credibility there and why, that doth protect too much?
Well, you give it, the more attention you give it, the more legs you might be giving it that it might otherwise have.
And Troy Hutchinson said, in 2017, I could say something on the floor and it could be on Twitter and go around the world by the time I walk back to my office. Yeah. And so they don't want to, it be that as it may, if Dan Proft had said, or if I had said, Andy Menard's socks don't match, and when he makes eggs for his kids in the morning, the eggs are runny. I don't think they'd be calling a news conference to decry that. So it would seem that Proft / Rauner / the Republicans have truly gotten under somebody's skin.
Well, perhaps it's a byproduct of being late in the session. Tempers often flare this time of year. And with that said, like the legislative session, we're out of time here on Capitol View. So thanks for watching and join us again next week.